Kat, can you talk about some of your favorite books, both when you were the age of your intended reader and also the YA books that you like now?
Oh gosh. Well, okay, so this is going to sound shameless, but one of the most recent YA books that I read is one of David's books, because when he sort of came into this process, I thought, oh, I better read some of his books. And so I read a couple of his books, and he has a book called Two Boys Kissing, which is astonishing and beautiful, and that now certainly makes it onto my list of favorite YA novels. I love Eleanor and Park, like profoundly. There's also a book called I'll Give You the Sun, which I think is beautifully written. So when I was, when we were growing up, Julia, YA wasn't a thing, right?
I don't think we're the same age. I think you're much older.
Says my college roommate.
You're 10 days older.
I am 10 days older than she is. So we didn't read YA. So there was a moment where you went from reading like whatever, Nancy Drew and the Black Stallion, and you used up all of those series, and you're like, well, I guess now I have to read adult books, and so then you just started reading adult books. So I read all of those Mary Stuart romances. Did anybody do those? Oh, I love them so much. Yeah, and now I don't have a favorite author or anything like that. There are books that I feel passionately about, but I wouldn't say like go out and read everything by such and such a person.
Did you do like S.E. Hinton or Robert Cormier or any of those?
Not really. Tony did. Yeah, he loved those books, but no, that wasn't really part of my.
I'm torn. Father or son?
Yeah, it's a tough one.
I'll let Jen go first.
Sure. All right, you can.
So I'm curious about the sort of device of a cult, or something that very much appears as a cult or is introduced.
Yeah, I think we can safely call it a cult.
And how you created the reality of that both for yourself, but also for the reader. I mean, you didn't go off and join a cult.
Not that you know.
There'll be a membership drive at the end of this meeting.
I mean, okay, so in addition to, it's mostly reading things, right? So the one book that really springs to mind is a really fabulous book by a writer named Kevin Roos called The Unlikely Disciple. He's a nonfiction writer. He was, at the time that he wrote the book, he was either still an undergraduate at Brown or he had graduated from Brown, but the time that he's talking about is he was a sophomore at Brown and decided that he wanted to get outside of his bubble. And so he decided he was going to go and attend Jerry Falwell's Liberty University for a year. Yeah. And sort of pass as an evangelical Christian and write about it. And the book that he wrote is incredible. It's so even-handed and fair-minded and astute. And so, there were definitely scenes in there that I was very inspired by for like the recruitment drive, because they all go on spring break, they all go down to Florida and try to bring people to Jesus. And I thought, well, I don't know anything about that, so I better read up on it. And there's, cults are kind of fascinating, right? Like, I think we've all read articles that just make you think, could I be that person? Could that happen to me? So, yeah, I just read a lot. And then imagined a lot. Originally, it was actually in an evangelical cult. In the first 20 pages that I wrote, it was an evangelical cult, and then I realized that I had no business writing about an evangelical cult, and that I would have to spend 10 years just getting the vernacular of that right. And I thought, okay, I have to make something up that's completely my own, because then the rules are set by me and I can't get it wrong.
So you ripped up your application to Jerry Falwell.
Yeah. Forget it, Jerry.
All right, Sarah.
What was the whole idea that got you inspired to make this whole book?
The whole book. The idea was, I want to do whatever I can to save my planet. That was the idea.
Pretty short. Good idea, right?
Yeah.
All right, we have time for one or two more. Yeah.
How did you two then? How did you happen to meet? How did this collaboration happen?
Well, it's complicated, right?
It's complicated, but no, I was always a cheerleader of the book, as I live a double life. I'm a publisher at Scholastic, which publishes this book, and I'm an author as well. So it was very fun when the book was coming out to sort of say, hey, let's have coffee and just talk about it. And so I got to do that, but as is always the case when that is happening, I sort of am like, hey, so I'm approaching you as your publisher, but I'm also one of your fellow authors, and I want you to do all this author stuff. So that's sort of how we met.
Yeah, it's been very nice to be able to observe David in his natural habitat of the bookstore and sort of see how he does this. This is my first time out, but it is far from his first time out.
I get to do my old smoky Upper West Jewish voice with her and be like, so let me tell you, kid, this is how it goes. Let me tell you about the launch. Here's how it's gonna work. It's fun to get to play that role because I'm so much older. I mean, it really is. Been around the block so many times.
He's even older than Julia.
Oh my God, no way.
I know you said that you started with an outline. It took a long time. Without giving away any spoilers, do you feel that the book is similar to what you initially envisioned, or did it change significantly?
I mean, it's similar in a lot of ways, but even from the first draft to this final draft, there were some major changes. Like, as a first-time author, I didn't realize that you didn't have to attribute every line, so I lost about 140 pages just removing a lot of those attributions. And there were characters that switched gender preference partway through the writing of this book. There were characters that disappeared. There were new characters that came on board. So, you know, the overarching story didn't change that much, but a lot of the particulars did.
All right, yes.
Hi, Kat. Hi. Just wanted to find out what the process was from getting the book written. You said that you had written for 3 years and hadn't shown it to anyone. Can you walk us through then from that point on when you decided to show it to someone, what the process was to get it all the way to today? Okay.
Just the highlight.
Okay.
People are very trauma in their bodies.
Well, maybe you don't have
The
to.
highlights.
You can gloss over it.
Okay, so the highlights are.
Fiction if you want.
But pretty much half of the people in the room can answer that question because they've been through it. Dina, I see you. So the short version is I got an agent very quickly. Like, I wanted an agent and one fell into my lap and I said, great, now I have an agent. And then she sent it out and very quickly this lovely woman at Scholastic was interested in it. And I thought, okay, good. I'm going to be the exception. I'm not like all those other people who have a hard time selling their book. I'm going to have a really easy time selling my book. And then the deal kind of just never came through with Scholastic. There were enough things that gave people pause that it wasn't an immediate thing. And then I got rejected by roughly 6 million publishers, and did a lot of rewrites and hired an outside editor to help me figure out what was bad and what was good. And came back to Scholastic with this revised draft and ultimately had the great gift of apparently persuading them that it was worth taking a risk on.
And now here we are.
And here we are. Cut to.
I love the happy ending. All right, any last? All right. Wrapping up.
You mentioned wanting the message of teaching us to value the earth. You mentioned empathy earlier on amongst the characters. Are there any, the reader I'm assuming will probably most likely be a girl and maybe a young adult, perhaps, maybe older. Are there any messages, any ideas that you would like to communicate to this reader when they finish the book?
Yeah, I mean, those of you who know me know that I am not a particularly optimistic person by nature. That's not my most native state. But what I do really believe is that the only way to ensure that nothing will change is to do nothing, right? That if I can encapsulate the message that I want people to take away from the book, it's that you have to act as though it is still possible to make a change in the world. And even though it sometimes looks bleak, and even though you may have your doubts, you have to do what you can to influence the outcome in the direction that you want to see.
Good.